Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Bigfoot Tales. I'm your host, D.L.Soucy, coming to you from the coastline of Maine. Summer's coming. The other night there, just saw a couple of flocks of geese flying northward and heard some the following morning, so it's a sure sign that the weather's warming and it's about time to get off our expanding winter butts and head out into the woods and do some more Bigfoot hunting. Today I'm going to bring to you another tale. This one is from the state of Maine. It was written by R.B. Nason and published in the Outing magazine in 1908. I've renamed the title of this story, The Bigfoot at Chairback Pond. The original name of the story was Jacks Injun Devil. And this is just a short story about an encounter where a man was supposedly attacked by what they called in those days an Injun Devil. And one of the problems that I have with some of these stories in the old days is that the Injun Devil, or Indian Devil, as many people called it during the 1800s and beyond, is kind of a umbrella name for a lot of different things that are in the woods. Generally, when you hear a story about an Indian Devil, at least up here in Maine, anyways, what they're talking about actually is a mountain lion or a cougar or whatever you want to call it. That's sort of a thing. Feli concolor, as its actual name is called. And they used to be fairly plentiful in the state of Maine. Concolor had a huge territory that they used to travel, so but for what we had for territory up here, there was a huge population of them, and they died out in the early 1900s. I believe the last one shot. I don't recall right off the top of my head, but I believe it was sometime around 1930. It was the last one that was killed in the state of Maine. And they haven't been seen since then, but I do have it on very good authority by two different people who live in northern Maine that they have seen on separate occasions a cat. So I am fairly well convinced that we do have a population back in the state of Maine. Of course, it's possible that it was just a rare occasion, one-time thing, but you get a lot of different stories coming around. But anyhow, I'm starting to digress again, which I frequently do when nobody's there to stop me from doing so. We'll get back to Chairback Pond here. This is a story. Again, it was written. The occurrence of this story was circa 1900. It was submitted to the magazine and published a couple of years after it was submitted, I believe. And it talks about a bunch of guys who were on a fishing trip, and one of them, named Jack, had been telling stories about a four-legged trout, and which is, kind of strange in itself, but when you hear the story, you'll understand what a four-legged trout is, in case you've never heard one. And yes, they do exist, but they're not really trout. But let's get right into the story, and then afterwards I'll go into a little bit about why I believe it's actually a Bigfoot encounter. Jacks Injun Devil by R.B. Nason, 1908. We were coming out of the woods from a fishing trip, and Jack had been beguiling us with a yarn about the trout in Chairback Pond, which, he said, had 4 legs and no fins or gills. We had set him down as another one of the tall storytellers of the Maine woods when one of our party, who was something of a naturalist, identified Jack's 4-legged trout as a spotted newt or a salamander, and so established the truth of the main points of the story. We were in this somewhat reconciled and chastened frame of mind when the talk turned upon Injun Devils. "You can't tell me nothing about Injun Devils," said Jack, shaking his head with an air of profound conviction. "Did you ever see one?" we chorused. "You bet your life I have, and I weren't more than 10 miles from here, neither." "This isn't another four-legged trout, is it, Jack?" we asked. "Well, you needn't believe it unless you want to, but 'twa'n't no four-legged trout nor nothing of the kind. 'Twas an Injun Devil, I tell you, and them's straight facts. Bill Cobb was with me, and he'll tell you the same thing." "What did it look like?" I asked. "Didn't look like nothing I ever saw before nor since, and I've seen everything that travels these woods. 'Twas big as a man and covered all over with hair, just like a darn dog." The naturalist suggested a bear. "Bear nothing," snorted Jack. "Don't you suppose I know what a bear looks like? I've hunted bears ever since I was knee-high to a spavined toad, and seen more of 'em than you could shake a stick at." "Well, tell us about it anyway," all of us urged. Jack slowly loaded up his pipe and commenced. "Well, me and Bill was fishing Orson, and long toward night we come to a camp where Babcock had been getting out knees and spoil bars the winter before. We went in and built up a fire and made some tea and cooked some fish for supper. By that time it got pretty dark, but pretty soon the moon come up full and made the clearing round the camp light as day. You couldn't see as far as you mind to anywheres in the clearing on both sides of the brook, so you needn't say I couldn't see it just as I'm telling you. Well, long after supper, Bill, he found a keg with some molasses in it, and I went to work and made some candy." You didn't have any canned goods with you, did you?" I asked. "Well, I can't say we hadn't been a-drinking some, but nothing to amount to nothing," he continued. "We didn't start with only a pint anyway between the both of us, and that weren't enough to keep the flies off. No, sir, we weren't drunk, neither of us. I can handle a long necker myself alone, and then I ain't what you'd call drunk neither. I never was what you could call real loaded more than 2 or 3 times, and there was more than a pint to 2 of us, I want you to know." "Well, go on anyways," we put in, heading him off. "You had only a pint for fly medicine and couldn't have been very much affected, that is true, and you had made some molasses candy." "Yes, sir, and when I got it cooked enough, I went down to the brook to cool it off. There was a big hemlock slanting across the brook just above where I was, lodged pretty low down on the other side in some old fir tops, and while I squat there on a rock cooling the candy off, I heard them bushes crack, and I looked up quick, and I want you to know, there he was. He had his forward legs up on the log, and he was looking me straight in the face. His face looked just like a cussed monkey grinning at you, and he had teeth as long as my finger, and eyes shining like 2 coals of fire. I want you to know that I was scared. I couldn't wiggle for more than a minute, and he looking right at me, and then I dropped the frying pan just as he come up on that log like a cat, and stood up on his hind legs as straight as a man. I could see him as plain as I can see you this minute. I want you to know I never was that scared in my born days, and never since. I let out a yell at me and started for the camp, and he after me. I ain't gone more than 20 feet before I stubbed my toe over a root and went flattered in a pancake. You'd better believe I did some tall scratching and yelling, but I hadn't more than time to wink twice before he lit on top of me. Just that minute Bill come a-running out of the camp, and that must have scared him off. Jack stopped and pulled at his pipe, his face set and stern. After a moment he continued, "Well, sir, I got up out of that, and I was so weak I couldn't scarcely stand. We didn't wait for him to come back, neither. We struck a beeline out for the tote road over for home, and we didn't stop till we got out of the woods out to the main road. We went and woke up D.L. Crandallmeyer and went in there. My shirt was ripped clean off my back, and there was tracks on my shoulder where he lit on top of me, as big over as the palm of your 2 hands. D.L. Crandallmeyer tell you the same thing, too, for he saw him that night, and I've got the marks right there with me to this day. No, I ain't been in there since, and I don't ever collect to. You needn't believe there ain't no Injun Devil unless you want to, but, by Judas, I know there is." And that's the end of the story. There was a addendum to this piece that said, "Sometime after Jack told us the story, I learned that a man had escaped from a camp in the neighborhood during a terrible attack of delirium tremens and was never seen again, alive at any rate, but the body of a naked man was found in the woods in the early winter, half buried in the mold and leaves. Okay, so that's an addendum that suggests that maybe it was just a crazy man that he found. Now, getting back into the story, here's a couple of points here that made me believe that this is actually a Bigfoot encounter from around 1900 in the state of Maine. Of course, this is, kind of a third-hand story written in a magazine over 100 years ago, so it's kind of hard to tell whether it's actually written from truth or whether it's a total fiction made up by somebody else. But there are some points here that suggest to me that quite likely we are talking about a Bigfoot and an attack by that Bigfoot creature. We go back to the description, and he says, and I looked up quick, and I want you to know there he was. He had his forward legs up on the log, and he was looking me straight in the face, which, on the offhand, would lead you to believe that it was a cat or a bear. More likely a cat, because they're talking about an Injun Devil. However, the next sentence, his face looked just like a cussed monkey grinning at you. In those days, people knew what monkeys looked like. They weren't something that was a foreign creature. People would see them in newspapers and circus sideshow posters and whatnot. There were various, at that time, small circuses with exotic animals and sideshows and things like that would travel around the country. And they weren't a stranger to Maine. They came to Maine, and there were a lot of places that had them. So these people would know what a monkey looked like, or at least what the pictures of them look like. And a monkey doesn't look anything like a mountain lion. And he says he was all covered with hair like a dog, which is kind of the descriptions that we get today. And he come up on that log and stood up on his hind legs as straight as a man. Now, this hemlock that was blown over was at an angle. And if you're going to climb on a hemlock, if you're a bipedal creature, you're going to put your arms, or your forward legs, as some would call it if it was an animal, on that tree and use them to boost yourself up onto that tree. So this is what I think he's actually describing here, is this creature, we'll call it for now, with a monkey face and all covered with hair, climbing up on that log to jump over the log and attack him as he was trying to cool off the candy in the brook. So again, this could be totally fiction, but for my money, what I'm going to guess is that it's actually a third-hand account, possibly enlarged upon by the people who told the story originally. But again, this is a story of a Bigfoot, maybe, don't know for sure again, coming from the Chairback Pond area of the state of Maine from circa 1900. And again, this one isn't in my new book, Sasquatch, Searching for the Answer, but I am working on a book that I'm probably going to have out next year, called Bigfoot Tales, and a lot of these stories that I'm sharing here are going to be in that book. So if you want to wait for it, please do. It'll be available at some point in time. Until then, enjoy more Bigfoot Tales. Make sure that you comment, rate, and subscribe. And if you're interested on getting together and getting on some Bigfoot hunts in the state of Maine, visit the Maine Bigfoot Research Group over at Yahoo Groups. You can, in your search engine, key in Maine Bigfoot Research and click onto it from there. But until then, I'll see you next time on Bigfoot Tales. And again, this is coming to you from the state of Maine. Enjoy.